Okay, so today we're diving headfirst into, well, some pretty specialized language.
Hmm.
The kind that makes you stop and go, huh,
Yeah.
it sounds maybe like a formula for success, or maybe just a wall of jargon. We're looking at dual audience DPM marketing prototypes.
It definitely doesn't just roll off the tongue, does it?
I don't know.
And you'd be right, I think, to assume this isn't standard textbook stuff. It feels very conceptual, maybe like an internal name for a specific process they worked out.
Exactly.
Oh.
And that's why we're here, right? Our mission today is to take this dense-sounding term, dual audience DPM marketing prototypes, and really unpack it
Yeah, break it down.
piece by piece.
Right.
We want to figure out the strategy it's actually describing. It sounds like some kind of test and learn thing. Okay, let's get into it.
Well, when you start connecting the parts, the basic idea becomes clearer. It seems to point towards a really agile, iterative way of doing marketing.
Iterative how?
Iterative for when you have to appeal to two fundamentally different customer groups at the same time. And the key bit seems to be using modern digital methods, that's probably the DPM, to, test things out and lower the risk before you go all in.
Okay, let's start with that foundation then. The part that sounds like the main challenge, dual audience.
Right.
When a company talks about a dual audience, it's not just like two segments of the same market, is it? It's targeting two really distinct groups. Groups with different needs, different motivations, maybe even totally separate problems they're trying to solve.
Exactly. And that underlying difference, that potential conflict, seems to be what the source material really focuses on. These aren't similar groups at all. And if the strategy doesn't, properly account for their distinct needs, the whole marketing effort could fall flat. You might end up confusing one audience while trying to reach the other, or just alienating both.
Okay.
The sources seem to show, three main ways this complexity plays out.
All right, lay them out for us. What's the first, maybe the most common split?
So the first one is that kind of structural divide between B2B and B2C. Business to business versus business to consumer.
Right, like software maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Picture some collaboration software. They might have an enterprise version, right, for big companies. The buyer there is maybe a CIO.
Okay.
And that CIO cares about, I don't know, long-term licenses, security, integrations, complex stuff. But then maybe they also have a freemium version, marketed directly to individual remote workers.
Oh, okay.
And that person cares about price, maybe free, quick setup, ease of use on their own laptop, totally different priorities.
So you've got this corporate pitch about risk and efficiency, and then this consumer pitch about getting cool features easily and maybe for free.
Yeah.
How do you even manage that in your branding without making the big corporate client think it's just some cheap toy?
Well, that's the friction, isn't it? That's the core challenge. This dual audience idea means you almost need two parallel marketing universes running.
Right.
The B2B side needs maybe formal evidence-based stuff, case studies, white papers, while the B2C side might do better with viral social media, easy sign-up flows.
Right.
The tricky part is making sure that B2C buzz doesn't somehow undermine the seriousness needed for the B2B sale.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about the second example? You mentioned a split between the buyer and the user. That sounds different.
Yeah, this one's fascinating because the person making the buying decision isn't the same person actually using the product.
Okay, like for kids stuff.
Exactly. Think about a kid's educational app. The parent is the buyer, right? They're motivated by educational value, safety features, maybe the price. But the child is the user. And they're motivated purely by, is it fun? Do I like the characters? Is the game engaging?
That's a great point. Because if you only market the educational stuff to the parent, the kid might hate it and never use it. Then the purchase is wasted.
Right.
But if you only market the fun stuff to the kid, the parent might see it as just, a distraction and refuse to pay for it.
Precisely. So the value proposition has to work on two levels. You need a logical pitch for the buyer, the parent, and an emotional fun pitch for the user, the child.
So in this framework, you're developing two separate campaign tracks again. One targeting the wallet, one targeting the actual interaction.
Basically, yeah. It's about hitting both motivations.
And then the third one you mentioned, platform businesses. You said that's the most complex.
I think so, yeah. Because platform businesses, they live or die based on balancing two sides.
Like Uber, drivers and riders.
Exactly. Or Airbnb with hosts and guests. These aren't just separate groups. Their needs can actually be in direct conflict sometimes. It's often a zero-sum game.
How so?
Well, think about it. The Airbnb host wants to charge the highest possible nightly rate, right? Maximize their income.
Sure.
But the guest wants the lowest possible rate. Find a great deal. Their core financial motivations are opposed. Ah, right. And the platform, Airbnb or Uber, has to market to both simultaneously. They need to tell hosts, list with us, make great money, and tell guests, book with us, find amazing deals. That sounds tricky.
It's threading a very fine needle, yeah. So in this whole dual audience DPM idea, really understanding these different, often conflicting needs, B2B2C, buyer, user, host, guest, that's got to be step one. You absolutely have to map out those friction points for both sides before you can even start designing a strategy.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So once we've mapped the who, the two audiences, we need to figure out the how. And that brings us to the middle part, that kind of mysterious acronym, DPM.
Right, the ambiguous bit.
It's not a standard term everyone knows, but based on the context, it clearly signals something about the methodology of the marketing.
It definitely points towards, modern, maybe data-heavy practices. What's really interesting here, I think, is how the choice of what DPM means, because there seem to be a few possibilities, could fundamentally change how you approach that dual audience challenge. Okay, let's break those down. What's the first possibility for DPM? Maybe the most obvious one.
Well, the first contender could be digital product marketing. This makes sense if the product itself is digital, right? An app, software, an online service.
Uh-huh.
If you define DPM this way, then the focus shifts entirely to marketing the features and benefits within that digital experience itself.
Okay, so how would that choice affect our dual audience? Let's go back to that software company, the one with B2B and B2C versions.
Right. If DPM means digital product marketing, then your prototypes, your tests, they need to focus on communicating specific features that appeal to both sides, but maybe differently.
For example.
Well, for the B2B side, the campaign prototype might highlight, say, a new dashboard feature for security reporting, something the CIO cares about.
Got it.
But for the B2C user, maybe the prototype highlights a fun new filter or a sharing feature. The marketing becomes less about overall brand and much more about demonstrating specific, measurable product value all through digital channels.
Okay, that's one possibility. What's next for DPM?
The second one, and this one's maybe broader, is digital performance marketing.
Performance marketing. Okay, I know that one.
Yeah, this is the purely data-driven approach. It's obsessed with, quantifiable results, clicks, conversions, cost per acquisition, return on ad spend, immediate sales.
Hard numbers.
It prioritizes rapid, measurable growth, sometimes above all else.
Okay, now that sounds like a huge challenge for our platform example, like Uber. If you're doing digital performance marketing, how do you even prototype performance when your key metrics, your acquisition goals, are totally different for drivers versus riders?
That's exactly the strategic hurdle. If you're measuring the driver side, maybe performance means sign-up completion rate or time to their first paid ride.
Okay.
But if you're measuring the rider side, performance means maybe first ride completed or how long they keep the app installed. Totally different KPIs.
Right.
So your prototype campaigns have to be kind of siloed, right, to measure those different KPIs accurately. But they also need to be coherent enough overall so you don't just blow your budget chasing a vanity metric on one side that doesn't actually help the platform balance.
Wow.
Performance marketing with a dual audience demands really sophisticated tracking and attribution.
Yeah, that really highlights the difference between just doing digital marketing and actually prototyping it in this complex way. Okay, what's the third option for DPM?
The third possibility is direct-to-person marketing. This is kind of the ultimate impersonalization.
Okay.
It means moving beyond broad segments and using really granular data to target specific individuals, tailoring the message, the timing, the offer based on their known behavior or preferences.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, I think. If we apply that definition, direct-to-person, to the buyer versus user problem, the parent and child with the educational app, that means you're not just personalizing the message. You might be personalizing the channel and the timing based on who you think is actually holding the phone or tablet at that moment.
Precisely. For the parent, the buyer, maybe your direct-to-person prototype is an email sent in the evening talking about security updates or educational progress reports.
Yeah.
But for the child, the user, the prototype might be like a personalized pop-up inside the game featuring their favorite character, maybe during peak afternoon playtimes.
That's incredibly specific.
It is. So choosing which DPM you mean, digital product, digital performance, or direct-to-person, really clarifies the whole framework's digital focus. Is it about the product features, the hard performance numbers, or deep, deep personalization?
Okay. So we've got the dual audience problem, the two distinct groups. We've got the DPM approach focusing on digital data and precision in one of those three ways. But the final piece, the thing that makes this a whole strategy, is the marketing prototypes part.
Exactly. And that term, marketing prototypes, that's what shifts this whole thing from just, running a campaign to an iterative process focused on reducing risk.
Right, like a prototype in product design is a basic version to test ideas. So here, marketing prototypes means creating and testing early small-scale versions of your marketing.
Yeah, like mini campaigns, maybe just specific ad copy or a landing page or a micro-targeting strategy. You test these small things to see if your dual audience message actually works, if it resonates, before you spend the big bucks on a full launch.
Okay.
The emphasis is all on speed and measurement before you fully commit. This whole framework seems built on that agile idea. You don't just guess which message works best for hosts versus guests on Airbnb.
Right.
You prototype different value propositions for each, maybe A/B test them in a controlled way, measure the results, and then decide.
But wait, doesn't that slow things down?
Right.
I mean, if you have two audiences and maybe three ways to interpret DPM, are you suddenly running like 6 different tiny campaigns just to prove the concept?
Yeah.
How is that agile?
Well, I think the argument is that it's the necessary cost to avoid a much bigger failure later.
Ah.
The sources seem pretty clear that the real value here is mitigating that risk up front. You avoid sinking millions into a big campaign that, say, really excites the B2C users, but makes your B2B clients feel like the product isn't serious enough for them.
Right. You find that out early with less money on the line.
Exactly. You prove the dual strategy works with what you could call minimum viable campaigns, maybe just focused landing pages or super specific ad sets. You gather actual data on how each audience responds.
So this iterative test and learn approach lets you refine things based on data, reducing risk, and making sure the final big campaign is built on something solid, something you know works for both groups.
It means, if your first prototype campaign for Airbnb hosts gets amazing engagement, but your simultaneous prototype for guests leads to a bunch of people abandoning their booking, well, you haven't wasted your whole budget.
You've just learned something important.
Right. You've gained actionable insight. You know your message to guests is off somehow. So you pivot that message, test again, and you only scale up the whole thing when both prototypes are hitting their target metrics.
Okay, let's put that whole slightly scary phrase back together. Dual audience DPM marketing prototypes. It started out sounding like pure jargon, but now,
Yeah.
I can see it describes a pretty rigorous, modern way of working.
So the final synthesis, putting it all together, is something like this. This phrase describes the process of designing and then really rigorously testing early-stage experimental marketing strategies.
Okay.
And those strategies have to work for two fundamentally distinct audiences at the same time. And you use a chosen DPM method, product, performance, or person-focused, to measure how well they're working and iterate until you get a balanced, high-performing campaign ready for a full launch.
So basically, it's a systematic, agile way to develop and tune marketing for products serving two different masters, always trying to lower the risk by testing with data first. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to absorb this kind of complex strategic thinking?
Well, I think it means that whenever you're dealing with conflicting interests, maybe you're managing two teams with different goals or pitching something to different levels of decision makers, you might want to adopt this kind of prototyping mindset.
Test small first.
Yeah. And since this whole framework is so heavily based on iterating when there's conflict, maybe the final thought for you to chew on is just how much harder that gets with the platform model we talked about.
The hosts and guests,
Right.
drivers and riders.
Exactly. When the core needs of your two audiences are really fundamentally at odds, like the host wanting higher prices and the guest wanting lower prices, a marketing message that's perfectly optimized for one side might actually push away the other side. So the challenge isn't just running two prototypes side by side. It might be running layered prototypes. You have to test the secondary effects, the cross-contamination. Like, if your prototype campaign aimed at recruiting more hosts is super successful, but you simultaneously see a measurable drop in guest signups during that test, well, that host prototype actually failed in the bigger picture, didn't it?
Even though the hosts loved it.
Right, because it upset the platform balance. So you'd have to prototype and test not just the direct effect on each audience, but how your actions towards one audience indirectly affect the other.
Wow. That's a perfect challenge to end on.
Yeah.
Thinking about how many layers of testing you'd need to really get that equilibrium right. in those high-tension platform situations.
It gets complex fast.
And for you, listening, maybe think about how you could apply that iterative prototyping approach, not just to marketing, but maybe to any big decision where the stakes are high. Don't just jump into the deep end. Prototype the approach, test the waters, and validate the outcome first. Until next time.